Ever sit there and wonder what you're worth? Or what your value is to society? Or what are the things that matter now versus the past? Well, I've been reflecting on that. Not only because of the news, but the ways businesses are run now, and hell, even the way that I or anyone else is treated at their jobs. In fact, this line of thinking was instilled in my mind ironically by video games. Well, not exactly video games themselves, but the video game industry. I talked about this on my main channel, linked up on the top if you will, but that along with life in general got me thinking, what even matters? What do we value in the age we live in? See, what happened in the past year and continuously through some parts of this year was that many talented developers poured their blood, sweat, and pixels into making fantastic video games only to be let go once the game was over. Why was that? Well, their value was making a video game, a great one at that, but after the game was made, their value dropped to zero. In fact, to some executives, it would even seem that their value dropped into the negative, where these humans with their lives, emotions, personalities, and beings were viewed as unused costs and a cancer upon the company, especially the company's profit. So they were simply cut out and let go, as any malignant tumor would. Now, if this is how they were treated, that begs the question, what really is our value as people? Again, I repeat, as people with our lives, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and our spider webs of reality. Many philosophies would argue that human beings have inherent value, that they deserve at least a minimum sustenance from life to be able to live without the constant anxiety of how they might survive the next day. Well, there are other philosophies that might say that human beings don't have any value and that the entire discussion is an egocentric construct meant to endow something that is inherently valueless with value because that is the core biological function of the ego. But who cares what some philosophers think? How about we look and reflect on what really is the value of people in the age we live in? If you're into reading newspapers every morning with your fresh cup of coffee, especially the business section of the paper, you'll notice some recurring news that will always be highlighted. The first is a country's gross domestic product, or GDP, and the GDP growth rate. The second is a country's policy rate, or benchmark interest rate, that the central bank of the country has set. Then you might also see how the indices of stocks like the Dow Jones or FTSE 100 is doing, and some other things like inflation or the unemployment rate currently. These are called macroeconomic indicators. Economics, as some say, is the study and answers to life, the universe, and everything. But in actuality, they mean to say economics is the study of money, which has now become life, the universe, and everything in it. But we'll get into that. If you ask anyone to investigate how a country is doing, their first impulse will be to go and look up these macroeconomic indicators. All the biggest headlines will be revolving around them, and I tell you, people become millionaires overnight if they can predict these indicators accurately. But why? Why is it that we want to check how a country is doing? These monetary and numeric things are the things we look at. Why don't we look at how fulfilled people are? Why don't we look at how communities are doing? Why don't we look at what people are thinking and feeling? Why don't we value the humanity of humanity? Well, the fact of the matter, at least in my experience, is that humanity is of no value in the age we live in. Yes, quantitative data is all the rage now. However, that excuse is just a subterfuge. The real reason why we love this data is that we value every life through the economic or monetary value it generates. Put simply, we value life through how much money it is generating and can generate. What I want to say is that the age we live in is now hyper-focused on money. Though, it would be ignorant to say that the entire world only focuses on money. No, like the above macroeconomic indicators, there are other indicators that judge people's happiness, like the Gross National Happiness Index. But I believe it's all padding to give some semblance of hope to people that there are experts looking out for them and their happiness. This is the same spiel that goes on with corporates, like the archived corporate social responsibility, which was succeeded by the environmental, social, and governance or ESG framework. There are now entire scores dedicated for how well a company does on these things. But if this really mattered, wouldn't there be regulations about it? And wouldn't the core principle and law of every economy, that of shareholder wealth maximization, be reformed or entirely removed? This term I just spoke, shareholder wealth maximization, is a very, very scary term. It is set in law and legally binds management to take every decision that will lead to the wealth maximization of existing shareholders, meaning that share prices need to continually go up. Let's say if you, as a CEO, take an action that benefits employees at the expense of shareholders, you are open to legal liability and the wrath of both shareholders and regulatory authorities. Let that sink in for a moment. I studied this principle in finance and just wrote it in my notebook for class and even gave exams about it. But only when I sat down and reflected on the implications of this statement, this law, did I realize what really mattered. You and I don't matter. At the end of the day, the bottom line matters. If you or the company makes money, and not only that, if it consistently makes more money year on year, that is the only thing that counts. That's right. If you make $1 billion, that's not enough if you made $1 billion the previous year. And if you make $1 billion next year, why? That's atrocious. That means you haven't grown in 3 years. Ugh. Behind the padding, these are the things that those in power and so-called experts really look at. They cry sustainability, but in reality, nobody cares about a company that has a positive impact on anything other than the bottom line. I will state it again. The real value of anything, including you and me, is how much money we can make. Set this in your conscious because this has already been hardwired in your unconscious. Maybe by doing so, you can at least have the free will in choosing to go along with this thinking or completely reject it. But before I continue, I would highly appreciate a like or dislike if you liked or disliked this video, and please let me know the reasons down in the below. I would love to have a conversation with you. Now, let's go all the way back to the unfortunate case of developers of video game companies. When you first heard of what happened, you might have been disgusted. But do you now see, after learning what truly matters in the age we live in, how letting go of these developers was in fact an inevitability? Why would you keep something that would eat up your profits and bottom lines, would slow your growth and decrease your shareholders' wealth? If you really think about it, and like many, if you valued money alone, this would be something that you would do too, wouldn't it? I know if I was completely immersed in this paradigm, I definitely would. But I don't purport that the wisdom I want from writing this video is to be able to see like those who are in power. I don't want the above to make sense, nor do I want to be okay with this. I don't want to understand the system or why things happen so I can also, quote unquote, win. No, the wisdom I seek is to be able to break out from this line of thinking, from this line of valuation. But alas, in all my days of pondering over this sad fact, I find it hard to break out of. They say money doesn't buy you happiness, but it damn well buys you security, to give you the foundation to be happy. I also want a lot of things like a new gaming PC or the next cutting edge smartphone, and unfortunately a lot more. But can't we appreciate the value of money and things, yet restrict ourselves from valuing things only from a monetary perspective? Since but mere children, you and I were put into an education system that never really valued us on our worth as humans. Our parents and our teachers consistently told us to do well in school, but it was never for the sake of gaining true knowledge or wisdom. The reason why you went to school, the reason why you entered college and strove so hard was to get a good career, was to make a good living, was to become financially independent. It was all to increase your and my monetary value. If from that tender age we were taught to value things monetarily, it's pretty hard to break out from. But imagine an age where we can live in valuing things apart from money. Imagine if you were loved by your parents regardless of your monetary value or place in a monetary society. What a burden lifted from your shoulders that would be, huh? Imagine just knowing that you are loved. Imagine an education system that didn't prepare you to become a good employee. An education system free from monetary value judgment. A system that's only goal was to open the minds of the next generation and leave them to traverse life, making positive impacts, aside from money, of course. Would it always be a pain to study then? So many of our young develop anxiety disorders and suffer through panic attacks because they are thrown into an irrational simulation of the adult life when it was their time to enjoy and grow, protected by the adults until they were prepared for the various challenges in life. Imagine a world without that. Imagine a world where you valued yourself and those who you know by their intrinsic value rather than money. Would you have your issues with self-worth if you were taught that you are valuable regardless of your place in the monetary society? Would you love people conditionally by how much monetary benefit they could bring you when you knew they had so much more to offer than that? Or in the reverse, would you be in doubt of your relationships if you didn't keep up monetarily when you knew that they valued and loved you regardless of the money you made? That world seems so far off, so imaginary and so utopian. But I want that world and the ways to achieve it. I want the wisdom to achieve it. And as always, remember, this isn't me teaching you wisdom, it's me trying to get to wisdom myself. What are your thoughts on the knowledge and experiences I shared and my judgment on the matter? What wisdom do you seek and what wisdom do you offer? I would love to read in the comments below.